Recorded Books presents The Cowboy's Challenge by Sinclair Jayne, narrated by C.J. Bloom. Chapter 1. Gray's Saloon, Marietta, Montana. His favorite watering hole in America, and he'd been in a lot of them. But Gray's, with its worn, wide-planked floor, that had survived the stomp of thousands of cowboy and cowgirl boots over its century and a half, and its wide, battered bar that had smoothed the slide of whiskeys straight up for the thirsty for just as long, was the best. And it was home. Or so he'd always believed. Bowen Ballantyne turned away from his reflection in the tarnished and warped mirror behind the bar and stared moodily at the dance floor that was surprisingly busy for a Sunday night. Too early for most cowboys to be hitting town to prepare for the Copper Mountain Rodeo next weekend, but eager to arrive at the ranch to see their granddad, Bowen and his two cousins had hopped in their rigs the minute their events at the Panhandle Rodeo had wrapped and driven home. Home. Damn. That word again. He'd ignored the 2 beers his cousin Bodie had ordered for him, and instead picked up his whiskey and stared at the amber liquid like it had the answers he needed. He was the oldest. He needed to figure out a solution to the problem Granddad had casually dumped in their laps tonight. He was thinking of selling the ranch. The idea was as out there as a 100-point ride. 5 generations of Ballantynes, for as long as he could remember, the 3 of them had planned to join Granddad at Three Tree Ranch. Sure, they knew they'd have to have side gigs. The ranch was massive, but not economically viable to support all of them initially. But that's why they'd busted it on the pro rodeo for the past handful of years, saved their money, invested. He and his cousins, Bodie and Beck, would need to sit down to see if they had enough to offer on the ranch. They'd never figured Granddad would sell. It had always been handed down. The money they'd saved had been to make improvements on the ranch, take care of Granddad's needs if and when he decided to retire. Even that concept seemed foreign. Granddad epitomized hands-on. So what was up? Had his mom and 2 aunts put too much pressure on him? Had he finally caved? And since all the moms were descending on Tuesday, to spruce up the ranch for sale and give Papa one last Ballantyne bash to remember, Bowen doubted their combined rodeo earnings and investments would begin to cut into the multi-million-dollar sale price his real estate mogul mother would dream up. Sure, all 3 of them were top earners on the pro tour and had their fair share of endorsements, but they weren't the pop stars, A-list actors, or tech startup kingpins his mom had in her client base. She'd even gushed about a new K-pop star client she had. Bowen hadn't even imagined his mom knew what K-pop was. Heck, he wasn't sure he did. Without the ranch, Bowen would feel lost, and he was sure his granddad would too. His mom and aunts would see to that. Not deliberately. They just thought they knew better than any man alive. Of course, they were all long single, and pretty happy about it from all Bowen could tell. Not that he could point a finger. He'd never once had a serious relationship, and didn't figure he'd change that stat any time soon. He held the whiskey to his lips, but paused. The amber swirl caught the light and reminded him of a girl. What was her name? Little barrel racer in summer stock rodeo when he'd been a teen. She'd had eyes the color of whiskey and hair the color of clouds, and a mouth that rarely stopped challenging him. He shook his head. Why was he thinking of her? Just because he was back in Marietta? What was her name? He remembered her nickname, the one he'd accidentally bestowed and Bodie had used with reckless abandon. Damn, she'd been tough. Young and obvious and sweet. Too sweet. And another ranch kid who had to grow up tough because her daddy didn't stick around. And, as usual, he'd been aloof was the nicest way one woman had described him. Bowen owned who and what he was. Dang, but that girl...
Sample complete. Ready to continue?